Behind closed doors, in a quiet English manner, a silent war raged, a battle fought not with guns, but with whispers, secrets, and unbreakable codes. What if the fate of millions hinged on a language no enemy could understand? Step into a hidden world where every message decrypted was a gamble with death, and the smallest mistake could unravel the fragile thread holding the future together. This is the story no one was meant to hear. In the quiet countryside of Buckinghamshire, the sprawling manor of Bletchley Park stood as an unlikely fortress of secrets. Beneath its quaint exterior, a brilliant and clandestine battle was raging, not one of tanks or bombs, but of minds. It was here that Evelyn Shaw, a young Cambridge mathematician, had arrived in the summer of 1940, joining the elite group tasked with cracking the Nazis' most feared weapon, the Enigma code. Evelyn's journey began with uncertainty. Like many of her colleagues, she was recruited from the university halls, where her affinity for numbers and patterns had set her apart. The war, which ravaged Europe with unprecedented violence, demanded new kinds of heroes, and Evelyn was to be one of them, though no one outside the walls of Bletchley Park would know her name or her sacrifice for decades to come. The work was grueling and intense. Long hours bent over cryptic messages intercepted by the Allies, Evelyn and her team sought to uncover the Nazi communications that could tip the scales of battle. Every morning brought fresh intercepts from German U-boats prowling the Atlantic or the commands directing blitzkrieg assaults across Poland and France. The Enigma machine's intricate rotors and electrical circuits scrambled messages into indecipherable text, but Evelyn's mind saw through the chaos. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly one evening in October 1941. While cross-referencing weather reports with intercepted messages, Evelyn noticed a subtle but consistent pattern, a small flaw in how operators repeated certain phrases. This flaw, combined with a series of logical deductions, allowed her to develop a method to narrow down the machine's rotor settings. The revelation was monumental. It meant that for brief windows each day, the Allies could read German messages, gaining intelligence that saved thousands of lives. The implications of this work soon rippled outward. The Battle of Britain was underway, and the Royal Air Force, guided by the decrypted Enigma intelligence, was able to anticipate Luftwaffe attacks, deploying Spitfires with deadly precision. For the first time, the Allies gained an edge in the war's air battles, and it was the unseen effort of Evelyn and her peers that turned the tide. Yet secrecy remained paramount. No one outside Bletchley Park could know the source of this intelligence. Evelyn and her colleagues lived in a world of enforced silence. Even their closest families believed they worked in mundane clerical roles. This silence bred isolation, but Evelyn found solace in her small circle of fellow codebreakers, brilliant men and women whose quiet determination forged a unique camaraderie. Despite the gravity of their mission, moments of levity punctuated the tension. Evelyn often recalled the evenings when laughter echoed through the cramped huts, where tired eyes scanned pages of ciphertext, and hope was found in shared stories and tea breaks. The work forged bonds deeper than friendship, for all knew they were part of something far greater than themselves. As the war escalated, the stakes grew higher. In 1944, Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion, was planned with meticulous secrecy. Evelyn's team played a critical role, decrypting German troop movements and coastal defenses along Normandy. The intelligence enabled the Allies to choose the invasion beaches with strategic advantage, ensuring the success of the largest amphibious assault in history. The invasion's success was a bittersweet victory for Evelyn. The jubilation of Allied forces advancing into Nazi-occupied France contrasted sharply with the quiet suffering she knew lay behind enemy lines and in concentration camps, whose horrors were beginning to emerge through fragmented reports. Her work helped hasten the end of the war, but the cost was imprinted on her soul. After WWII Day, the Codebreakers' contributions remained shrouded in secrecy for decades. Evelyn returned to Cambridge, her war efforts unacknowledged in the public eye. She married, raised children, and lived a quiet life, always guarding the secrets of Bletchley Park. It was only in the late 1970s, as the British government began to declassify wartime operations, that Evelyn's story, and those of her fellow codebreakers, began to surface. In interviews and memoirs, she recounted the long nights of decoding, the pressure of lives depending on their success, and the bittersweet triumph of invisible victory. Today, Bletchley Park stands as a monument not to guns or tanks, but to intellect and perseverance. Evelyn Shaw's name may not be etched on grand war memorials, but her legacy endures in the countless lives saved by the whispered secrets of Enigma's breaking. The story of those silent warriors reminds us that sometimes the most decisive battles are fought not on fields of destruction, but in the quiet chambers of human genius. The winter of 1941 in Leningrad was unlike any other. The city, once a vibrant hub of culture and industry, had been transformed into a frozen fortress under siege. For the Ivanov family, life had become a relentless struggle against hunger, cold, and the constant drone of enemy artillery. As the German Wehrmacht encircled the city, cutting off all supply routes, the people of Leningrad found themselves trapped in a nightmare that would stretch for 900 agonizing days. Nikolai Ivanov, a factory worker, watched the city around him crumble but refused to surrender. His wife, Elena, tended to their 3 children with fierce determination, scavenging for scraps of food and ration cards that grew thinner by the week. Their youngest daughter, Anya, kept a small diary hidden beneath her mattress, a secret record of survival, hope, and loss that would one day tell the world what it meant to live through the siege. The city's defenses were a patchwork of shattered buildings, frozen canals, and desperate human will. Soviet soldiers manned the crumbling walls, while civilians organized fire brigades and makeshift hospitals. Yet starvation was the greatest enemy. Bread was rationed to as little as 125 grams a day, often made with sawdust to stretch supplies. People fainted in the streets, and the dead were carried away silently to mass graves. In the darkest moments, Elena would huddle with Anya and her brothers in their cold apartment, trying to warm their thin bodies by the flickering light of a candle. The blackout meant that the city was cloaked in darkness each night to avoid air raids, but it also deepened the chill and the fear. The incessant bombing raids of the Luftwaffe sought to break the spirit of Leningrad's defenders, but the people clung to their identity and each other. Partisans operated in the forests outside the city, smuggling news and supplies through secret tunnels and dangerous routes. Among them was Dmitry, a childhood friend of Nikolai, who risked his life daily to deliver messages from the Soviet command. The underground resistance provided a vital link to the outside world, carrying hope into the heart of the besieged city. As winter gave way to a brief spring, the siege persisted, and the Ivanovs endured. Anya's diary grew thick with observations, the sound of distant explosions, the bitter hunger, the courage of neighbors sharing what little they had. She wrote of the kindness of a doctor in the local hospital who treated the wounded despite his own starvation, and of the stories whispered in basements where families hid from the bombs. By 1943, Soviet forces launched Operation Iskra, breaking the blockade with a narrow land corridor along the frozen Lake Ladoga. The road of life across the ice became a lifeline, allowing food and medical supplies to trickle in, though at great risk from German shelling. The siege was not over, but a glimmer of relief reached the city. Nikolai returned to his factory duties with renewed vigor, helping to produce weapons for the Red Army. Elena volunteered at a communal kitchen, distributing soup that was barely enough but kept bodies alive. Anya, though still a child, had grown resilient beyond her years, her diary a testament to endurance and the human spirit's refusal to break. The final months of the siege were marked by bitter cold and relentless artillery, but the Soviet forces pressed on, determined to liberate Leningrad. In January 1944, after nearly 2.5 years, the siege was lifted. The city, though battered and scarred, had survived. The Ivanov family emerged from the ordeal forever changed. Friends and neighbors had perished, homes were reduced to rubble, but their community had endured. Anya's diary was preserved by her mother and would later be discovered by historians, offering an intimate and personal perspective on one of the most brutal sieges in history. The siege of Leningrad remains a powerful symbol of resistance against overwhelming odds. Through the Ivanov story, we see not just the horrors of war but the extraordinary strength of ordinary people who refused to surrender. Their ghosts linger in the streets and in the memories of a city reborn from ashes, reminding us that even in the darkest winter, hope can survive. John Yazzie grew up beneath the vast skies of the Navajo Nation, where stories of ancestors and the desert winds shaped his childhood. When the war came to the Pacific, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, unaware that his heritage would become one of the most vital weapons against Imperial Japan. John's journey from a reservation in Arizona to the bloody beaches of Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima would become part of a secret chapter in World War II, the story of the Navajo code talkers. The U.S. military faced a daunting challenge in the Pacific theater. Japanese forces were well-trained and fiercely committed, and traditional communication methods were vulnerable to interception. Conventional codes were frequently broken, risking lives and compromising operations. The idea to use Native American languages as a code was bold and unprecedented. John was one of over 400 Navajo men recruited for this mission. At Camp Pendleton, they developed a code based on their complex language, a code that the enemy could never decipher because Navajo was unwritten and spoken only within their community. This code was not a simple translation. It was an elaborate system using Navajo words to represent military terms, weapons, and tactics. In the thick jungles of Guadalcanal, John and his fellow code talkers relayed messages under fire, their voices a lifeline amid chaos. The Japanese didn't understand our language or our culture, John recalled in later years. We were the invisible warriors, and the code was our shield. The speed and accuracy of their transmissions allowed U.S. commanders to coordinate attacks and reposition troops with a precision that was critical in battles where seconds meant survival. But the fight was not only against the enemy abroad. John faced discrimination at home and within the military. Prejudice and misunderstanding shadowed Native Americans, and many code talkers endured racism even as they risked their lives for a country that often overlooked their contributions. Yet, the pride in their culture and the knowledge that they were fighting to protect their people and their land sustained them. At Iwo Jima, the bloodiest battle in the Pacific, John's code work became legendary. Amid the relentless bombardment, he transmitted orders that saved countless Marines. The iconic flag raising on Mount Suribachi was facilitated by communications his team made possible. Yet, the war's horrors weighed heavily. Friends fell in battle, and the brutal conditions tested every ounce of their resolve. The secrecy surrounding the code talkers was strict. After the war, their role was classified, and they returned home quietly, their heroism unrecognized for decades. John struggled with memories of combat and the silence that shrouded his sacrifice. He became an advocate for native rights and education, seeking to honor the legacy of his people. It was not until the late 1960s and beyond that the U.S. government acknowledged the code talkers' crucial contribution. John and his comrades received medals and commendations, their story finally shared with a wider public. Museums, documentaries, and ceremonies now celebrate the unique fusion of heritage and patriotism they embodied. John Yazie's story is more than a military triumph. It is a testament to identity, resilience, and the power of language. The Navajo code talkers turned an ancient tongue into an unbreakable shield, proving that culture and courage could alter the course of history. Their legacy endures as a symbol of pride for Native Americans and a reminder that even in the global conflict of World War II, the smallest voices can echo the loudest. In the shadowed streets of occupied Lyon, Simone Laurent moved with quiet determination. A schoolteacher before the war, she had transformed into a leader of the French resistance, a secret network of men and women risking everything to fight the Nazi occupation from within. Her story, like so many others, was one of courage, sacrifice, and the fierce will to reclaim freedom against overwhelming odds. After the fall of France in 1940, the country was divided, partly controlled by the collaborationist Vichy government, partly occupied by German forces. The streets once filled with laughter and life became cloaked in suspicion and fear. Simone refused to accept this new reality. Drawing on her connections and skills, she helped form one of the underground groups dedicated to sabotage, espionage, and aiding Allied forces. Simone's group operated under the constant threat of betrayal and discovery. Their missions ranged from cutting railway lines vital to German supply routes, smuggling Allied agents across borders, to forging identity papers for Jews and political dissidents fleeing persecution. Each operation was a perilous gamble. One misstep could mean imprisonment, torture, or death. One of Simone's closest allies was Pierre, a former factory worker turned saboteur. Together, they orchestrated the destruction of a railway bridge near Lyon, delaying troop movements ahead of the Allied invasion. The success came at a heavy price. Several comrades were captured, and the Gestapo intensified their hunt. Simone narrowly escaped a raid on their safe house, a harrowing night that solidified her resolve. Espionage played a central role. Simone maintained secret correspondence with agents of the British SOE, Special Operations Executive, whose mission was to support resistance movements across Europe. Through coded messages and clandestine meetings, she coordinated supply drops and shared intelligence that proved invaluable to the D-Day planners. The moral complexities of resistance weighed heavily. Simone grappled with the cost of betrayal, friends turning informants, civilians caught in reprisals, and the question of when violence was justified. Letters she wrote but never sent to her family reveal this inner conflict, a human face behind the heroic veneer. As the war intensified, the resistance swelled, fueled by hope and desperation. On August 1944, as Allied forces approached Paris, Simone's network played a critical role in uprisings that distracted German troops and facilitated liberation. The city erupted in celebration, but the price was high. Losses that left scars on the survivors. After the war, Simone continued teaching, but the memories of those clandestine years stayed with her. The resistance's story was complex, marked by both glory and painful compromise. Public recognition was slow, but as history unfolded, the bravery of women like Simone gained deserved acclaim. Her story is preserved in diaries, interviews, and the fading graffiti on Lyons' walls, reminders that freedom was wrested from darkness not only on battlefields but in whispered meetings, coded letters, and acts of quiet defiance. The veil of resistance was lifted, revealing a mosaic of sacrifice and hope that shaped the future of France and the world. Dr. Kenji Matsuda had spent years tending to patients in Hiroshima, a city known for its bustling port and vibrant culture. In August 1945, as the war neared its devastating end, his life, and the lives of thousands, would be forever altered by a single, unimaginable event. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima was not just a moment in history. It was a cataclysm that reshaped humanity's understanding of war, suffering, and survival. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Kenji was preparing for a routine day at the Red Cross Hospital. Without warning, a blinding light filled the sky, followed by a massive shockwave that leveled buildings and incinerated everything within a mile radius. The mushroom cloud rose like a dark omen over the city. Kenji, thrown from his feet but miraculously alive, found himself in a surreal wasteland of fire, ash, and shattered lives. The hospital was destroyed, but Kenji immediately began to organize medical relief wherever he could. Survivors arrived with horrifying injuries, severe burns, shattered bones, radiation sickness. Supplies were scarce, and the infrastructure was in ruins. The doctor's skills were pushed to their limits as he witnessed the agony of victims whose wounds defied any previous medical knowledge. Amid the chaos, Kenji encountered a young girl, Yuki, who had lost her family and bore severe burns. His efforts to save her became a symbol of the resilience and heartbreak that defined the aftermath. He kept a journal detailing her treatment, the medical uncertainties, and the ethical dilemmas posed by a weapon that unleashed destruction on an unprecedented scale. The bombing of Nagasaki followed 3 days later, compounding the tragedy. Kenji traveled there briefly, offering assistance despite the risks of radiation exposure. The horror was doubled, and the long-term effects, cancers, birth defects, psychological trauma, would haunt survivors for decades. The atomic bombings forced the world to confront the terrifying potential of nuclear warfare. Kenji struggled with profound questions. Could such destruction ever be justified? How could humanity prevent future atrocities? His experiences led him to advocate for peace and nuclear disarmament, speaking at international forums and educating future generations about the costs of war. Back in the United States, the scientists of the Manhattan Project wrestled with similar doubts. Interviews and letters reveal a complex mix of triumph, guilt, and regret. The bomb ended the war but opened the door to the Cold War's nuclear arms race and a world perpetually on edge. Kenji's story is a poignant reminder of war's human cost beyond strategy and politics. It is the story of lives shattered in an instant and the slow, painful path toward healing and reconciliation. Through his eyes, we glimpse the fragile hope for a future where such weapons are never used again, and where the ashes of Hiroshima serve as a solemn warning to all humanity. Some battles leave no visible scars, fought in shadows beyond the battlefield. The whispered secrets cracked here saved thousands, yet remained buried for decades. Proof that war's deadliest weapons are not always guns, but the hidden knowledge of those who dare to outthink the enemy. The silence they kept was their burden, and the cost of victory was a secret the world almost forgot.